Patience can sometimes feel like a virtue that gets lost on a lot of people in today's NBA, with the expectation being for everyone that gets drafted to immediately be the stud talent that they were expected to be from the jump. Obviously, this is never a realistic expectation, and it results in a lot of insane discourse early on in the careers of many, but simultaneously, you do expect young players to gradually improve over time and break out after a few seasons. This is what we'll be discussing today, as we'll be identifying 4 young players in particular that have really started to emerge this year after slow starts to their careers, and are now on the path that many expected from them on draft day. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first young player we'll be discussing today that is finally starting to emerge into the top talent many expected him to be when he was drafted is Jonathan Kuminga of the Golden State Warriors. Kuminga was one of the first players to ever be drafted coming from the G League Ignite program, as he took part in the inaugural season of its existence, and from the jump, he was a bit of a polarizing prospect. He was one of the top recruits in his high school class, but his time in the G League was productive yet incredibly inconsistent. He was a very raw talent that was oozing with athleticism, size, and length, but lacked the feel for the game necessary to actually put all of it to use right away. The tools were always there, but basketball is a game that requires just as much intellectually as it does physically. When he was drafted to the Warriors 7th overall in 2021, it also really didn't help that he immediately came into a situation where the goal was to win now rather than putting any emphasis on the development. So throughout his first 2 seasons, he'd get sporadic usage, flashing some incredibly intriguing abilities as a slasher and finisher, but he wasn't necessarily skilled enough to earn the trust of Coach Steve Kerr, which has honestly been the cause of a lot of frustration. There were plenty of times where Kuminga would have a really good run, and then he would fall out of favor over something small, while the team's struggling veterans would get to play through all their rough patches without hesitation. But this year, Kuminga has finally forced his way into the team's starting lineup by the sheer will of his talent all coming together. This year, Kuminga has shown that he can be reliable and versatile as a defender. He has a better feel for where he needs to be on the floor, moving very well without the ball in his hands to create easy scoring chances. He's looking comfortable operating out of the post, attacking mismatches, and passing out to the open shooters, and his production is up across the board because of it. Over his last 34 games, which is the point where he got inserted into the team's starting lineup, Kuminga is averaging about 18 points per game, shooting the ball 56% from the field in that span, and the Warriors are 5.5 points better per 100 possessions with him on the floor versus when he's on the bench, demonstrating that the team is at their best with him out on the court. The next young player that is finally starting to live up to the hype this season is Alperen Sengun of the Houston Rockets. When Sengun was coming through the ranks, it was coming during the emergence of Nikola Jokic breaking boundaries as a highly skilled do-it-all center. With Jokic winning MVP awards, stuffing the stat sheet nightly, and elevating his Nuggets team to new heights, teams obviously started to look more fondly at young big men that may have been heavier and slower-footed, but were highly skilled offensively. This is where the appeal in Sengun came in, because he almost immediately started drawing comparisons to Jokic, being called Baby Jokic for that exact reason. And of course, these kinds of comparisons set Sengun up for disappointment early in his career, but I'd be lying if I said that those comparisons weren't starting to hold some weight right now. Of course, Jokic is in a league of his own in regards to what he can do on a nightly basis, but when it comes to overall playstyle, Sengun has really started to put it all together this year, and is absolutely starting to play like the next great playmaking big man. Of course, in his first 2 seasons, he flashed a ton of potential in this regard, but he wasn't necessarily a focal point of the team's offense, and oftentimes his coach lost trust in him because of his struggles defensively. This season, with a change in coaching in Houston to Ime Udoka, a lot more of the offense now runs through him, utilizing his passing talent and post work much more often, and because of that, he's producing at a near all-star all-star level already, averaging about 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. He's also been much more dependable defensively, which has helped him stay on the floor more. He may not be an all-star yet, but Nikola Jokic wasn't an all-star in his first 3 seasons either, so next year could be the year that Şengün gets that nod if he keeps it up. The next young player that is finally starting to live up to the hype this season after a slow start to their career is Jaylen Johnson of the Atlanta Hawks. Johnson is another player who came out of high school as one of the highest rated recruits, and when he played his college ball at Duke, it of course came with lofty expectations, but he became a bit of a polarizing player when he withdrew early from Duke in order to focus solely on preparing for the draft. He was viewed as lottery talent for most of the process, but he dropped to the 20th pick in the 2021 draft, and his overall lack of experience against high-level competition was pretty clear during his rookie season, and he spent a lot of time down in the G League because of it. Johnson's arc is somewhat similar to Kuminga's in that he is a highly athletic wing player who needed time to develop more, and early in his career was still figuring out how to put his physical gifts to use. After 2 seasons of sporadic use off the bench, he has emerged in a massive way this year as one of the few bright spots in an otherwise disappointing Atlanta Hawks squad. He's earned a spot in the starting lineup. He went from scoring 6 points per game last year to 16 points per game this year. He plays with so much energy flying around the court, defending hard and pushing the pace in transition, and he's a terrific rebounder for a forward as well, grabbing about 9 rebounds per game. His 3-point shot is also coming along, now falling at about a league average rate. He's making plays off the dribble, and he's now gotten to a point where defenses really need to prepare ahead of time for his motor, because he'll catch you off guard as a defender and backdoor you for an easy slam, or just blow by you if you're not paying attention. And finally, the last young player we'll be discussing today that is finally starting to live up to the hype is Aaron Nesmith of the Indiana Pacers. Unlike the other players discussed in today's video, Nesmith's appeal wasn't for his elite athleticism or his unreal skill overall, it was because of his shooting prowess. Nesmith was a lottery pick in the 2020 NBA draft solely because he was viewed as the best shooter in the entire draft class that year. But being drafted to a Celtics team that had lofty goals, it again meant that minutes would only come to those who were ready to produce. Unfortunately for Aaron, his shooting didn't immediately translate to the NBA level, shooting just 32% from 3 during his first 2 seasons in Boston, and in the summer of 2022, the team packaged him in a trade to Indiana, which was probably the best thing that could have happened to him. The Pacers were still a young team at the time looking to take swings on buy low talent like Nesmith, and he was already starting games for them that year. This year, now in his 2nd year in Indiana, is when he has really started to come along, and his elite sharpshooting has really started to come into form, as he went from being a 36% shooter from 3 last year to knocking down a whopping 45% of his threes this year. That makes him the 3rd best 3-point shooter in the entire NBA this season, percentage-wise, and he's doing it while scoring a career-high 12.5 points per game as well. Nesmith's playing the role of 3-and-D perfectly right now, and while it may have taken a few years for him to get there, he's currently playing exactly how most envisioned that he would play when he was drafted. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these breakout players. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.